What's up, everybody? Excited to be live with you here tonight. Let's turn this light up a little bit. Got some exciting things to cover tonight. Definitely going to finish up with some 2026 real estate market predictions. It's always fun. But we're going to talk about St. Pete a little bit tonight. I'm so torn on these lives because Tampa, St. Pete, beaches, Pasco County suburbs, I feel like all these areas could fill an entire log of videos, and it's a constant dilemma I have of what do I focus on, and so much of that comes from you guys. So any of you watching here, would love to hear from you in the chat where you're from. Also, any questions that you have as we get through this. Tonight's going to be a little bit shorter. Got a couple things to cover, and I want to cover this big development happening in St. Pete that has kind of been happening already, but now that there's this new acquisition as a part of it, we're seeing this other thing being added on. What's up, Kevin from Lakeland? I love how... So one of the reasons I started doing these lives is because most of the viewers are local-ish, and this is a fun thing to engage with locals on, and all these new developments that affect even areas like Lakeland. You know, Lakeland's about an hour away from where I live, but maybe a little bit more. Depends what part of Lakeland you're going to, but it depends. Like, these things affect Lakeland. Tampa, St. Pete stuff affects Lakeland. It affects this growth that happens. And Lakeland is really sandwiched in this really unique area between the Tampa, St. Pete area and the Orlando area, where like it might just Lakeland is where these areas are going to meet eventually, which is really kind of interesting to me, along the I-4 corridor, as they say. But tonight we're going to dig into a couple different things. I'm going to start with some stuff in St. Pete that I think is exciting, but also more than exciting, I think it's telling of what downtown St. Pete is going to look like in the future. So this article here from the Tampa Bay Business Journal, they're going to be featured pretty heavily tonight, but St. Pete nears deal to purchase the CSX rail line for Urban Trail. Now, this rail line's really big. This is a very confusing article. They're trying to buy a $7 million stretch of it. The whole rail line is worth like $80 million. They're trying to buy a very specific stretch of it. So here you can see CSX commissioned an appraisal in 2024 that valued the property at $87 million. There's all kinds of dynamics involved in this. This rail line connects downtown St. Pete, really Central Avenue, all the way over to almost like the beaches in Largo. So it really goes across the whole area in kind of a unique way. But they're looking to purchase this small stretch right... Why does it do that to me? Right here. It's really this stretch that goes through Fergs and can connect here to the Pinellas Trail. So the Pinellas Trail is right over here. There's a bridge under here. They could connect it over here. But there's this kind of stretch along here of this rail line. And you can see how this rail line goes way up here. But they're just trying to make some urban paths through here. Now, one reason I really like this, in a previous job of mine, I traveled a lot. So I've been to a lot of places throughout Europe, and European cities have, pedestrian areas. And I think St. Pete is working really hard to have those. So many Facebook groups or Instagram accounts that are like car-free St. Pete and those kind of things where the community does really want these things. And St. Pete is responding by looking for the opportunities for those. And another thing involved in this is all the other developments right around here. So going back to the article, this is a $7 million deal, and it includes funds from Ferguson, who owns Ferg's, that restaurant, and Ellison Development, which is involved in a lot of the big tower developments in the area. And they're developing The Central, which is a mixed-use project at the former police headquarters site, both of which are on this rail segment in the city's Edge District. The Central involves the Halcyon, which is a big commercial development where ARK Invest is going to move their headquarters once that space is complete. The Halcyon is also going to be home to a celebrity chef restaurant. So this is an interesting development in the midst of this. Now, this was announced months ago, but this just adds this layer to this railroad purchase that people don't often think about. So not only the person involved in helping the city purchase the stretch of railroad is also involved in developing the Central, and also is connected to the owner of Ferg's, and is also bringing in big names like celebrity chefs. So this is one of the guys that is on Chopped and The Kitchen and Iron Chef America, bringing this hotel into the Central's autograph collection hotel, which is going to be called the Halcyon. So the Halcyon is like an autograph collection hotel I've stayed at in other cities, but this Zacharian Hospitality will manage all food, beverage, and hospitality services at the Halcyon. So not only having a restaurant, but manage all hospitality services for this hotel, which is very interesting. And here's something interesting Zacharian said about the city, and here he is right here, along with Ellison from Ellison Development. St. Petersburg is a city brimming with energy and creativity, and we are thrilled to create a dining experience that captures that spirit. The Central is unlike any development I've seen. Being able to bring our culinary leadership not only to the hotel, restaurant, but also to the hotel's events and Halcyon office tenants is a truly unique opportunity. We look forward to building something world-class that both the community and visitors will love. Super cool, all this involvement, but the next layer to this, which I already mentioned, is ARK Invest and Kathy Woods. This is what the Halcyon will look like. Her involvement in this was announced a long time ago, back in July of 2025. Construction of this building is expected to be complete by Q1 2027. This is an interesting development for a lot of reasons in St. Pete, because St. Pete has a pretty well-known shortage of commercial space. Now, having some like Class A commercial space is like a major step up. Obviously, some of these bigger developments like the Waldorf Astoria or 400 Central, these bigger condo towers, have some commercial space in them, but they don't always have 3 floors that they could rent out to a big investment firm. It's not really set up like that. It's more set up like retail style, maybe some offices, but not to where somebody could take up 20,000 square feet of space. So this is really a unique offering here in St. Petersburg that I think is really cool. Let's look at what some of Kathy Woods has to say about this. So, and obviously the Ellisons are very involved in this. They're the ones developing this. But Kathy here said, Kathy Wood, I said Woods, like my kids, like my friends' parents would say Walmarts or something. Our future location at Halcyon will place us at the epicenter of a city we love and surround our employees with world-class amenities, a space designed to meet our needs and the energy of downtown. So that's an interesting point. This will help her attract employees, maybe potentially help other firms attract employees if they're in a downtown that's really cool, that can, compete with places like Austin, like where they're right on the river, or cities like Nashville that are attractive cities. And honestly, I do think St. Petersburg is that for a lot of people. And I do talk to a lot of people that are moving here. St. Petersburg has a really unique draw to it. That is an exciting one. St. Pete also, as a part of this, there's a big garage, like a big parking garage, which is already built. And pretty soon, they're going to put a dinosaur on top of it. And this is super funny. It's just like one other little subtle attraction that will be a unique kind of downtown St. Pete thing. And I think that's really, really awesome. And this is in the Edge District. So the Edge District, let's go to the map real quick. If we go look at downtown St. Pete, the Edge District is really just this kind of edge of Central Avenue. So Central Avenue here is the divider. So north of this is First Avenue North. South of this is First Avenue South. Central Avenue has great food, museums. Here's kind of the pier area. Here's the St. Petersburg Pier. You get to this stretch they call the Edge District, which is really kind of the edge of downtown. But really kind of all along here is this area they call the Edge District. Here's the Tropicana Field, where the Rays are going to start their season next year, which is exciting for St. Pete. Who knows how long they'll be there, though. But that's the Edge District. It's just kind of this edge of downtown that is really cool, actually. Filled with cool stuff to walk to and from, and that really makes it attractive. There's condos there that are somewhat affordable. There's rentable apartments nearby. There's potential for a lot more development. If something does happen with the Tropicana, like we talked last live, if Kathy Wood's plan takes place for that, that could be developed into something very attractive. being nearby that obviously would be very valuable. And all these things kind of tie together in my mind. Even this purchase of the railroad ties into what's going to happen in the future to the Tropicana site. All that is very, very intriguing to me, and I'm really curious what will happen with that. All right, next on the docket, we've got Publix. So we've got a Lakeland resident on here. Publix is from Lakeland. The headquarters there, started there, and came toward the Tampa area pretty quickly. There's actually a building in Tarpon Springs where I used to live where it was the 8th Publix ever. My father-in-law tells me stories about going in. They always begged their mom to go to Publix instead of to another store because of the automatic doors and the scale. Publix was one of the first stores in the area to have automatic doors, and they were pretty high-tech for that. They also have these scales where you can weigh yourself as you're exiting, which is funny. Obviously, my kids love it. There's signs all over it that say don't jump on the scales. I think it's probably hard to find parts for those old scales at this point, but it's a really cool Publix touch. So when I first moved here, my wife was excited to have Publix nearby. She liked it. It's clean. That's what everybody says. It's clean. I don't really go to many stores that are dirty, so it didn't really stand out to me that much. But as we lived here a little bit longer, I realized, wow, Publix is not cheaper than other places. So then we started shopping at Sprouts, and then we went on a very organic kick where we got Whole Foods delivered, and obviously that was more expensive. But now we live, there's a Publix where we don't have to leave our neighborhood. We don't hit a stoplight. We barely hit a couple stop signs getting to Publix. So we end up going there for little odds and ends. But one thing that Publix is facing right now, in the midst of just inflation in general, is a really interesting price perception. So this is an interesting article, again, from the Tampa Bay Business Journal just the other day. Publix faces price perception challenge as food inflation sticks around. So in 2024, Tampa had some of the worst food and grocery inflation in the whole country. Some of that is because the infrastructure just doesn't quite exist to get stuff here easy. It's coming by truck or it's coming by boat or plane. We don't really have the rail system. Maybe that's because we're selling old railroads to cities instead of running trains on them. But as people approach the busy season, Publix is feeling a little bit crunched, and Publix has a bit of a price perception challenge. We're seeing this in other areas of retail. Consumers are stretched, which is driving a value-focused shopping mindset. I'm curious everyone's perception of Publix. It's such a local favorite, and they're kind of everywhere. They really have a big footprint outside of every kind of residential area in the Tampa area. But you can see here that compared to Walmart or Target, I'm saying it like Target's, I'm getting old. What in the world? Where a shopping cart of 60 basic everyday items runs a bill of $186 to $211 versus $230 at Publix. Now, not a huge difference, right? $20, $30, but if you're doing that every week, and that's something that I actually came to with my family recently, we eat pretty naturally, and I realized we're buying organic meat from Sprouts, and we already have Instacart, so they deliver it. It's not like extra. Sprouts doesn't upcharge things on Instacart, thankfully. But then I was like, hey, let's look at Aldi for this organic meat, and it's half the price. So I'm thinking of it as well, how can we be a little more conscious as prices of things keep going up, and other things just keep getting more and more expensive. So I moved here in 2020, and so many things are way more expensive. There's one thing that's gotten cheaper since I've been here, and that's my taxes on my house that has flooded a few times, which is very interesting. There's kind of some other stuff behind the scenes with that I'm a little concerned about. Why would the taxes go down, get cut in half? Obviously, the property isn't all of a sudden worth that much less, but we can talk about that big issue I think is going on later. But this is an interesting one. Publix, I wonder how they will be affected if this inflation increases, or if it just kind of sticks around at this pace. I'm really curious how that perception will stick around. Now, I work with a lot of people that move here from other states. And when they get here, I often hear feedback from them of wow, Publix is so expensive. I don't quite know why. Yeah, there's more BOGO kind of deals and stuff like that. So maybe you can offset it with that sometimes, but it is actually more expensive than many think. Okay, next I want to talk about insurance. Insurance is a topic that's near and dear to me because I've had giant insurance claims. Also because my dad sold insurance for 30 years, just retired. His dad sold life insurance, and his dad sold life insurance, mostly as retirement jobs once they retired from working for the public school systems. But I'm very familiar with insurance. My insurance on this house that I'm in right now is about $2,500 a year. It's about a $600,000 house. We're 3 miles from the water. We're not in a flood zone. We need a new roof, but it's attached in a way that insurance providers are okay with. Has hurricane clips, which means at the end of the trusses, there's just kind of this extra clip. And it has 3 nails in it, not just 2. It's a quirky thing. But that's my insurance here. Our other house in Tarpon Springs, which I would love to sell, I've not been able to sell it because it keeps flooding. Our insurance is incredibly expensive there. When we bought that house in 2020, our insurance was about $4,800 a year for the home and for the flood insurance. And we paid $300,000 for that house. It's only worth about that much now because it's flooded twice. We've lost some equity in that house. But the insurance has gone up so much. The insurance is currently $9,000 per year with flood insurance included. Flood insurance makes up a little more than half of that. So I've experienced insurance prices going up. This article, Florida's catastrophe exposure sees home insurance premiums soar. Now, this was published on December 1st. This is not an old article, but I want to point something out here. We're showing some big increases, right? Where average premiums are, $4,000 in Broward. This is supposed to say Broward, I think, and in Orange County, over $4,000 as well, which is main part of Orlando. Lake County, which is the west side of Orlando, has the fastest growing premiums, increasing 71% from 2021 to 2024. So that's the premise of this entire article is to 2024. Obviously, we're not in 2024. Here's showing the average premiums in 2024 across the state, and then the average home insurance premiums by U.S. county in 2024 across the country. Now, a lot of Florida's red on that more expensive end. I was surprised how much of Colorado is red in 2024. I know Colorado premiums went up recently because of specific exposure to fires. So I used to live here in Colorado Springs in El Paso County. The mean premium in 2024 is $4,300. When I left and I sold my house for about $400,000 in 2020, our premium was about $1,200. So that likely is more expensive now. But this entire premise of Florida home insurance being so high is interesting. When you look at a specific time frame, it has gone up a lot. It has. It's gone up like crazy. It's been unaffordable for many, many people. But I want to check this next article because this is another interesting view. Home insurance costs flatten across Florida. So the average premiums barely moved in September. Some insurers showed declines. Analysts say quieter storms and lower reinsurance costs could help moderate future rates. Reinsurance is a funny thing. So if you think of insurance as the mob, which the mob is kind of insurance, right? You pay us, we'll protect you. So if you think of insurance as the mob, you pay to be protected. Well, there's also a bigger mob. The bigger mob for insurance is reinsurance. So insurance companies pay reinsurance companies to insure them if there are giant losses. So reinsurance, there's like certain thresholds, like, hey, when we're losing this much money, you cover some of that so we don't lose as much. It's kind of odd. Insurance companies make money on investments. I think we often don't realize that, or if we forget that. We give them our money, they invest it in the market, and then they get a return on that so they can cover losses, and they make profit on that. Now, they can only make a certain amount of profit in a lot of companies. Now, giant companies, publicly traded, obviously they can make as much profit as they want, but a lot of us are insured by mutual companies where they have limits on how much profit they can make. I've been returned part of my premium many times by being insured by these companies. Now, sometimes it's like $50 or something, but they can only make a certain amount of money. So if premiums start going down, they start having to pay back their customers. And even State Farm is structured like this, to where if their premiums start going down, they're having to return some of those premiums to existing customers. So the premise of this, though, is insurance didn't go up again over the past few months. Really, September to November, it hasn't gone up. And that's really because we didn't have any hurricanes. Like, for the first time in a long time, we didn't have any hurricanes hit. I think it was the first time in 5 years we had no direct hits in Florida. I think in Florida for an entire hurricane season. That's pretty exciting for me, having navigated a few of those as a homeowner. They're so unpredictable, like what's actually going to happen. So Helene, which flooded my house last year, and which caused some of the worst flooding in the Tampa area in the past 100 years. It was miles off the coast. It was so far off the coast, and all we did was like catch the dirty side of this storm. It was going the other way, and just got slammed with just massive surges. The surges must have been 8 to 10 feet in a lot of the Tampa area. My house is 5 feet above sea level, and we had about 40 inches of water in the house. That's an odd house to walk into after the fact, when the refrigerator like floated and got jammed into the wall, and there's the water marks are like above the door handles everywhere, and there's a planter in the house, and like pulled all the dirt out of the planter and like spread it around the house. But pretty odd experience, to say the least. Obviously have a lot of videos about that if you haven't seen them already. But interesting to see home insurance costs flatten across the state, and that also encourages a lot of providers to come in. Another thing that I noticed in the midst of this, I don't know if it was in this article or in another, there's this process that Citizens Insurance does every year. They call it depopulation. It's their depopulation program. And a lot of insurance carriers do this, where they need to offload riskier policies, and so they help them find another service provider. So Citizens does this every year, and Citizens is subsidized by the state, so they're incentivized to do this so that they don't, waste our own taxpayer money. So they depopulate people, and then there's a few companies like Patriot Select that have been grabbing a lot of these policies, and they can't mark up the policy. They can't increase the price until it renews. So they're like losing money at first, and then they can increase. But there's not even limits on how much they can increase. They can really increase as much as their competition has, to where, obviously people if they increase, someone could shop around and get a better deal somewhere else. So they can increase just enough to where they keep their customer, but then it's kind of odd. It's very odd. So newcomer Patriot Select reduced its average premium by 11%, as its policy count increased from 138 to 669 over 1 month, which is wild. So this is a company just coming in, taking advantage of this depopulation program, being able to take these policies. Now they're up to 12,000 policies taken from Citizens. It's pretty intense. I'm actually a little concerned with one company taking so many of them, and seeing like what that renewal premium will look like. And it could be not as bad as I think, as there's been a little bit more of a handle on, litigation and non-catastrophic claims in the state. We had this big issue years ago, and there was some legislation in 2023 that really helped that. And what happened was a contractor could come knock on your door and say, hey, it looks like you have a leak, you got hit by the storm, and it could be legitimate. And they could say, hey, sign over your ability, give me the right to talk to your insurance company. I'll make it right for you. They make it sound really nice. And this is called the assignment of benefits. This was crazy because then, the contractor is negotiating with the insurance company, and the homeowner has given up their right to do it. Now they could still, ask questions and be involved, but they've signed over their benefits. So as much as the service provider, the contractor, can say is justified, they can receive from the insurance company. Insurance companies didn't like this. They started leaving. Then the state reformed it and got rid of it. So the assignment of benefits that doesn't exist in the same way anymore, which helps. I think we're finally seeing some of the effects of that, which I'm very thankful for. Okay, a couple more things as we come to the end here tonight. this one right here, this just stood out to me. Nothing's really happened with this yet, but Florida state parks face $759 million backlog of needed repairs. This is this big statewide report done on all the state parks and county parks in the whole state. And what's interesting, and it's honestly wild. Aging visitor centers, outdated septic tanks, a lack of accessibility, a lack of accessible sidewalks and ramps. So a lot of these aren't even just like compliant. They're not even accessible for someone in a wheelchair. So 759 million in backlog. That's according to a new state report released Monday that details funding required over the next decade to bolster the quality of Florida's 175 state parks, the health of their ecosystems, and the public's ability to enjoy them. This is interesting to me. My family and I love the state parks in Florida. There's a lot of them that are really beautiful and surprising. This one is actually just not far from me. This is Weeki Wachee River. And here you see our state parks have been shortchanged. They have. The report shows serious shortfall and reveals that the legislature is underfunding our award-winning state parks. The estimated repairs require at least $75 million a year. That would be a major increase compared to the funding allocated in recent years to address aging park infrastructure across a system that includes nearly 850 historic sites. This year, for instance, the Florida legislature approved $15 million for state park facility improvements, far less than the amount underscored in the report. Now, I lived in Colorado for 10 years before I moved here, so I have a real affinity for state parks and national parks and the value of them to not just the ecosystem, but to the feel of our communities, to the how visitors get to interact with our city and our landscape. I'm really into that, but specifically Florida. I think Florida has some of the most beautiful landscape, and I did not think that before I moved here. But the more we explore, the more we get out and go into these places, swim in these springs, and float down these rivers. They're really, really beautiful and really need to be taken care of. So I hope that we can get some more money for that. I think it's very, very important. And even stuff is just run down. Even some of the springs we go to up, in Lake County, west of Orlando, and then further north, they're just a little run down. A lot of them just need infrastructure boosting. Even just, roads need to be repaved, pavilions need to be rebuilt, all those kind of things. And then I'm sure this went on to outline a lot of it is wastewater infrastructure. So a lot of these outdated septic and sewer systems just need to be updated. When you're leaching sewage into the ground in a state park, it's obviously not ideal. Now, they've started to attack these outdated sewage systems in some areas, like around the Tampa Bay. Now, that's not a state park. That's just, hey, your sewage is leaking into the bay at a rate that's not sustainable. So we started to implement some things that these have to be changed out. Now, a lot of the reason people have septic tanks around the bay is because that area was kind of developed first and didn't have sewer systems when it was first developed. So people use septic systems, and there's still a lot of septic systems in Florida and in the Tampa area, but when it comes to how they affect waterways with leach fields and things like that, we have to be a little more careful. Okay, I want to wrap up tonight by going through Redfin's 2026 predictions, and this subtitle here is Welcome to the Great Housing Reset, which I think is kind of interesting because housing is in a weird place. Now, mostly it's odd to me just how few transactions we still have. So we're right around, I think, 3 million transactions per year. I think they talk about it in here. No, it's 4 million, which is potentially 4.2 million by the end of the year. Or no, sorry, that's 2026. 4.1 million by the end of 2025, which we're at this low, this steady pace, 23, 24, and 25 at 4.1 million. In 2021, which is peak pandemic, interest rates were super low. There were 6.1 million transactions. So people just moved a lot more then, and rates were low. It was, affordable. And then end of 2021 was when rates got into the sixes. The next year, and I'll share this chart with you, but I'm going to go through each of these predictions one at a time. So I'm skipping ahead. I'm sorry. Sorry. So let's go prediction number 1. and I'll kind of give you my take on each of these. Prediction number 1, mortgage rates will dip to low 6% range, one factor improving affordability. It doesn't improve affordability that much because it's not hard to get into the low 6s right now. With a little bit of concession from the seller for a buy down, I don't think this is actually that valuable of a prediction. Yeah, it's going to maybe be in 6.3 and you can buy it down to 6.0. Like, that's not making that much of a difference. But if our average stays a little bit lower, maybe we start trending down a little bit. So you can see here in 2021, Q1 was 3%. Q1, 5.3% of 2022. Then 6.8, 6.7, 6.6. So it's been very stagnant here for the past few years. Now they're just saying, yeah, maybe it's going to go down to this line. Not a really bold prediction. Prediction number 2, home buying affordability will improve as wages grow faster than prices. I don't know if I'm not an economist in that way for sure to predict wage growth. I don't think prices are going to go up on housing. I don't think they can. Because people simply can't afford the prices that are right now. So, and they're proving that by just not buying, by letting things sit. Even buyers that are very serious right now that I'm working with, we're making pretty low offers. You know, we're offering, you know, on, say if it's $700,000, we're offering $50,000 below the asking price. Even if they've lowered the price, yeah, we don't really care. Hey, this is what we're willing to pay for this, and we're getting some of those deals, that's for sure. Home prediction number 3, home sales will rise 3%. 3%, I don't know. I think they're going to go up quite a bit more than this. This is a pretty long stretch with them being low. I think if people realize that rates are not going to go down past 6 for the next year, they might just bite the bullet and go ahead and make their move. Or go ahead and do some of these other things that are, it's other predictions that are going to exist here. Rents will rise as demands for apartments rises and supply falls. So apartment supply has struggled to keep up in the U.S. for years. And, of course, locals that own houses don't like when apartments get built nearby. It's going to keep happening because there's a major shortage. And if we want apartments to be even affordable at all for young families, for, you know, young adults, then we need more of them. That's for sure. Prediction number 5, high housing costs will reshape households with more roommates and fewer babies. This one's interesting to me, as my wife and I are talking about having a 4th baby, and it's a stretch. You really do have the question of, like, do we want to take on, I mean, I have the question, do we want to take on this additional expense for the next 20 years? My wife doesn't think that. She's like, do I want to not sleep for the next 5 years? Is how she thinks of it. But we're seeing a decline in family sizes over the past 20 years. But we're seeing a lot of roommates, multi-generational housing, and some of this as our country just gets a little bit more diverse as well. This is coming from other cultures. A lot of cultures, you know, are multi-generational housing, and that's kind of common for a lot of other cultures. But it's interesting how I think this will happen quite a bit more. Prediction number 6, affordability crisis will unite policymakers across party lines. I don't expect policymakers to ever be united across party lines. Let's be clear on that. But this is an interesting part of this. Other housing proposals will include zoning changes to make it easier to build ADUs and home additions. So an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit. You know, they did this in Hawaii years ago, where they call it an ohana, where you could build a building on your property and you could rent it out. No restrictions. You could rent it out on VRBO, Airbnb, whatever. In Maui, they just changed it to where you can't do that. You can only rent it out long term. So these things come and go, and so it's kind of interesting, not that interesting. There's a lot of areas that already make it easier to build ADUs, like in St. Petersburg, where they're really deep lots and they have alleys, things like that. So it's not as challenging in some areas as people might think. Prediction number 7, more Americans will refi and remodel. You know, I definitely think this is true. And the market has seen this happen a lot in other market cycles. Now, refi is challenging. If people bought in the last 2 years, they don't have enough equity to refi anything out of that unless they put down a bunch of cash or unless they paid cash outright. Then they could finance it after the fact. But this refi and remodel, I think, will be a pretty big thing here in the next year. And I think that's where our remodeling company could expand a lot as well. So prediction number 8, New York City outskirts, and I mean some of these outskirts of specific metro areas is going to get very competitive as people move into the suburbs surrounding New York City. They move into the suburbs surrounding, these Great Lakes cities. Interesting prediction that the Great Lakes region will be hot. I don't quite know why. The Midwest and Great Lakes regions have wide appeal because they're fairly affordable and provide relatively safe havens against climate-related events like wildfires and floods. Yes, but jobs are the biggest deal in any market. They're by far the biggest deal. So housing markets most likely to heat up: New York City, Syracuse, New York, Cleveland, Ohio, St. Louis, Missouri, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Madison, Wisconsin. On the flip side, these ones are expected to cool down. Nashville, San Antonio, Austin, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, and Miami. So Florida and Texas kind of dominate that list. Prediction number 9, climate migration will go hyper-local. As climate-driven events like hurricanes and wildfires become more frequent, climate will become a more popular reason to move. But people won't necessarily make big moves from coastal Florida to the Midwest. I agree. They'll move from the water to inland a little bit. People don't want to leave where they live. They have friends, they have family, they have jobs, they have local places they like to go to. Not many people are just eager to move across the country. Prediction number 10, NAR will let local MLSs call the shots, sparking consolidation. Consumers don't really care about this. NAR, the National Association of Realtors, has been kind of a bully about things over the past few years, and this could just make it break out to where NAR is actually not that involved in how local MLSs and local realtor associations work, which I think would be good. Obviously, we can all locally agree to a code of ethics, and that's been kind of the main sticking point on this. Prediction number 11, AI will become a real estate matchmaker. Now, this is super interesting, and this is a reason I've been building content the way I have on my website and on other sources, is because what's going to happen is a lot of us use AI now. The more we talk to ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or Gemini or whatever, the more it knows you. I uploaded a photo to one the other day in my backyard. I'm like, is this an invasive tree? And it knows exactly what kind of tree it is, tells me, yes, it is invasive. If you're seeing these other things pop up, then you probably should cut it down because it could kind of take over and shade out all the undergrowth. And since you're in Tampa Bay, this is a common tree that's seen in this area nowadays. So it just kind of connects these things for you based on how much you use it. And pretty soon people are going to say, where should I live? And what realtor should I work with? And then based on the content that's out there, for AI to learn what a person is like, what an area is like, it's going to matchmake like that, which I think is really interesting. Because people aren't just going to ask, where's the best city to live in the Tampa area? They're going to ask, where should I live in the Tampa area? Which is honestly super intriguing to me. Obviously, we're a team of local realtors, and we'd love a chance to earn your real estate business. We do these lives just to share our insights on what's happening in the greater Tampa area. We spent a lot of time talking about St. Petersburg tonight. I'm super excited to see how St. Petersburg develops. If you have questions about St. Pete, I'd love to know them. And we've got a couple people on here. If anybody has questions right now, not just about St. Pete, but about anything, I'd love to spend a little bit of time here answering questions. I'm working on a bigger St. Pete video that is very challenging because I want to outline every neighborhood in St. Pete, and there's a lot of them. So I'm really working on making that it'll probably be a really long video, but the thing is, my St. Petersburg videos get long views. They don't always get as many views, but people watch them for so many hours. When I look at watch time, there's specific videos that get so much watch time because people are really trying to learn these areas from a distance. So I'm going to really keep digging into St. Petersburg. Obviously, we sell a lot of houses there, but I'm not there that much. So I don't want to act like I know everything about this area, but I still want to be able to, give a lot of valuable insight that I think would help people. So thank you guys for being here. I'm excited to keep doing these lives. Next week will be same time, same place. We'll see you guys then.